The movie opens during the Second World War, where the US B-24 Liberators are flying over the Pacific Ocean. The soldiers, led by Bombardier Louis Zamperini, are en route to execute a bombing mission against the Japanese-controlled Isle of Nauru. As they approach their target, Louis commands the airstrike, and his crews follow the order, successfully releasing the bombs. Not long after, the aircraft faces an onslaught from multiple Japanese fighter planes, resulting in damage to their planes. Pilot Phil informs Louis that their base is 5 hours away, and their brakes are no longer functional. Although their craft is shot at hundreds of times, the soldiers manage to make it back to their base. They attempt to land, but it proves to be almost impossible due to the faults in the aircraft. The tires on the landing gear come out and start screeching on the floor. Despite this setback, Phil manages to bring the aircraft to a stop at the very end of the runway. The scene then cuts to a flashback, showing a young Italian-American, Louis, living in Torrance, California. He appears to be a brat who always causes trouble and is chased by the police. At such a young age, he smokes, drinks liquor, and is even involved in stealing. Louis, being an Italian refugee, is often picked on by other American children his age. He also gets into frequent brawls with them, forcing the police to intervene. One day, Louis sits under the bleachers, watching his older brother's baseball game and drinking his liquor. Shortly after, he is caught by a guard, so he runs away to avoid any trouble. His older brother, Pete, happens to witness him running at a great speed, which makes him realize his potential to become a runner. It's amazing what drinking and smoking will do for you athletically. As a result, Pete decides to train him and encourages him for the same. Louis is a bit hesitant at first, but he agrees after some insistence. As the years pass by, he excels his running skills and wins each and every race competition he participates in. This earns him the nickname the Torrance Tornado. Tornadoes can't run. At one point in time, he manages to complete a 1-mile race in 4 minutes, setting a new American record for high school students. With this accomplishment, Louis receives an invitation to represent America at the 1936 Summer Olympics in Berlin. Before departing for it, he shares an emotional embrace with his brother and thanks him for everything. Pete imparts a valuable insight, stating that one moment of pain is worth a lifetime of glory. Louis will clearly remember this until the end of the movie. Thanks, Uncle Ben. The scene then cuts to the day of the Olympics, where Louis participates in a 5,000-meter race. As the race commences, his family sits beside their radios to hear him compete. In the first few laps, Louis is left behind by the other formidable contestants, making the situation intense. But eventually, he puts all his efforts and sprints at full speed, overtaking several runners. Despite finishing the race in 8th position, he sets a new world record by finishing the final lap in just 56 seconds, and another one for being so lazy in the first. He still aims to win the medal in the next Olympics, which will be held in 1940 in Tokyo. However, his dream gets shattered due to the outbreak of the Second World War. Back in the present, Louis finds Phil praying to God after successfully landing the aircraft. He doesn't seem to have any faith in God, so he doesn't care very much about the prayers. Starting from the very next day, he continues his training by running alongside a Jeep. He also impresses his fellow army men by beating his own record in the 4-minute mile. One day, Louis and his son receive another mission to search for a lost aircraft and rescue survivors. They are given the same old plane after repairing it using spare parts. Despite this, the team, including some new members, sets off for their mission. The instability of the plane becomes apparent when one of the engines fails mid-flight. As they try to make the best out of the situation, another engine fails, which causes the craft to crash in the ocean. As a consequence, 8 of the crew members lose their lives, leaving only 3 survivors: Louis, Phil, and Mac. The 3 of them get onto the inflatable rafts and take some time to calm themselves. Mac is completely hopeless and believes that their chances of survival are 0, but the other 2 ask him to stay positive. They have limited rations, some chocolates, and a bottle of water. Louis then decides that they'll eat 1 piece of chocolate in the morning and 1 at night, and drink only 2 sips of water a day. As night falls, they fall asleep on the boat, fighting against the freezing temperature. The following morning, the trio is awakened by the sound of an approaching airplane. In a quick action, they attempt to signal it using dye and a flare gun, but their efforts go unnoticed. Soon after, Louis discovers that all the chocolate boxes are empty, with Mac having consumed them all. Friggin' MacDonald, more like. This infuriates Louis, as now they are left with nothing. However, he controls his anger, as there's no point in fighting. The 3 then grapple with survival in the seemingly endless ocean, enduring days without food or water. In the midst of their struggle, a seagull lands on their boat. Starved, the soldiers immediately grab and devour its flesh to fulfill their hunger. hunger. However, their stomachs can't hold on to it, causing them to vomit. After this, they come up with the next plan. They use the same seagull's flesh as bait to catch fish. They then take turns to have a bite of the fish, bringing them temporary satisfaction. As time goes on, their situation grows increasingly dire. Moreover, they are battered by a sea storm one night, which makes them feel that their lives are slipping away from their hands. At this critical moment, Louis turns to prayer, saying that he'll serve his whole life for God if he saves them now. Miraculously, they survive the storm, and the following morning brings rain. The crew happily fills up their containers and drinks the drops from the sky. In the next few days, they successfully manage to catch a shark, providing them with much-needed sustenance. On the 27th day adrift, the crew spots another plane in the sky. They shoot their flare gun to attract attention, and the plane turns around, giving them a new sense of hope. However, their happiness is short-lived, because it turns out to be a Japanese aircraft that begins shooting at them. In a desperate bid to save themselves, the crew jumps into the water, dodging bullets and also fending off sharks. Shortly after, the aircraft flies away, after which the trio swim back up. Despite evading the danger, their inflatable boats are damaged due to the bullets. They hurriedly patch up the holes so that they can remain afloat and save themselves from shark attacks. Time continues to pass, and the three of them spend their days and nights on the same small boat. It has been over 40 days since they became stranded in the ocean. Mac's condition deteriorates to the worst, and as a result, he slowly succumbs to hunger. Louis and Phil wrap up his body and drop it in the water. Surprised they didn't eat him, honestly. Following this, the remaining two continue clinging to life, but their condition has deteriorated to the point where they are unable to talk or stand. On the 47th day of their ordeal, they come across a ship that unfortunately belongs to the Japanese soldiers, resulting in their immediate capture. Now prisoners of war, Louis and Phil are confined in separate dark cells on Kwajalein Atoll. There, they're provided with a meager sustenance of rice balls, which they hungrily consume. One day, the two American airmen face interrogation by a Japanese colonel who seeks information about newer bombers and the Norden bomb site, having extracted some details from them. Louis and Phil are transported to another prison camp in Tokyo alongside other prisoners. Upon arrival, they're separated in the vast crowd and are sent to different POW camps. Louis finds himself at Omori Detention Center under the supervision of a cruel-hearted commanding officer, Corporal Mutsuhiro Watanabe. According to Watanabe, all the prisoners are the enemies of Japan, so they'll be treated accordingly. While explaining prison rules, Watanabe spots Louis, looking him in the eye, so he beats him up with a thick wooden stick. After making them stand for a whole day, the new prisoners are sent to their camp hut where Louis meets other American soldiers. The next day, the prisoners are assembled on the ground, and Watanabe identifies individuals with particular talents. Noticing Louis's athletic background, Watanabe initiates a race between Louis and a Japanese officer. Clearly exhausted from lack of food, Louis collapses to the ground, which causes him to receive further beatings. It's apparent that Watanabe hates him the most, as he subjects him to more frequent physical and brutal assaults. Apart from enduring hard labor in the camp, the American soldiers also managed to stay informed about the war's progress via newspapers pilfered from the Japanese. A Marine soldier keeps track of American positions, but he's soon caught by the Japanese soldiers. As a consequence, he is beaten up mercilessly, while Louis and the other prisoners watch on helplessly. A few days later, Louis is given an opportunity to send a message home, confirming his survival. Turns out that the US government has already classified him as killed in action. Agreeing to this, he's taken to a radio station where he delivers a message to his family. He's also forced to falsely claim that he's being treated fairly so that they can get some mercy from the American government in the war. After this, Louis is offered good food after a long time. However, this gesture comes at a price, as he is later asked to broadcast another message containing anti-American propaganda. The Japanese men also offer him a great life in Japan if he does it, but the latter refuses to betray his principles and is consequently returned to the POW camp. Once back, Watanabe tells Louis that he's strong like himself and that they'd have been friends if they weren't enemies. But since Louis refused to comply with the Japanese order, Watanabe has all the prisoners punch him in the face, one by one. This punching spree lasts for an entire day, leaving his face bruised and battered. One day, the prisoners are instructed to perform a play of Cinderella to amuse the Japanese soldiers. Amidst this, Watanabe sits next to Louis and tells him he has been promoted to sergeant, so he'll be leaving Omori the next day. He asks Louis to congratulate him on the promotion, but the latter remains silent. The life of the prisoners at the camp gets immensely better after his departure. However, the good days don't last long, as the Allies bomb the neighboring city, causing the prisoners to be relocated to another camp called Naoetsu. Upon arriving there, Louis momentarily passes out at the the sight of Watanabe, who is unfortunately the commander of this camp. Watanabe delivers the same speech and hits Louie for no reason. Starting from the very next day, the labor work continues, and the prisoners are assigned to load large bags of coal onto the ship, which is even more exhausting than before. The weight of the bags and their fatigue combined causes some men to fall over the railing and die. One day, Louie, who is extremely exhausted, pauses doing work, so he is brought to Watanabe, who then punishes him by making him lift a large wooden beam and hold it over his head. Louie struggles, but Watanabe orders a guard to shoot him if he drops it. As a result, Louie holds it up for several hours despite the physical strain. Every prisoner has their attention on Louie, and they cheer for him in their low voices. Watanabe expects him to drop the beam, but Louie lifts it even higher while fearlessly staring at the sergeant's eyes. Unsettled by his defiance, Watanabe beats him brutally and abandons him in the same spot for the entire night. The next day, a superior Japanese officer announces the ceasefire and instructs the POWs to go take a bath in the nearby river. The prisoners initially believe that they're going to be executed, but as they get into the water, an American bomber plane flies overhead, indicating that the war is finally over. All the prisoners celebrate their victory, and soon after, the supplies are dropped in the camp. Amidst the celebration, Louie tries to find Watanabe in his quarters, but he seems to have already fled. He then sits down and stares at a picture of Watanabe as a child alongside his father. In the aftermath, Louie and the other POWs return to their home country, where their families are waiting for them at the airport. At the end of the film, a slideshow depicts the real Louie's post-war life. He married and had 2 children. Phil too survived and married. Watanabe went into hiding and evaded prosecution after being listed on the top 40 most wanted Japanese war criminals. Louie lived out his promise and devoted his life to God. With this newfound faith, he decided to forgive his wartime captors by meeting with many of them, but Watanabe still refused to meet him. Though Louie couldn't win the medal, he fulfilled his dream of running in the Olympics at the age of 80. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.